Welcome back to Looking for Work. Mike Roberts here. Super excited to be with you, and again, ready to answer questions. So I got a few that came through emails, and in the interim, I'll just sort of like put it out there. We do this every 2 weeks. If you've got questions, you're looking to land that first job in tech, I got answers. I hope. So the best way to get your questions to me is just drop them in the comment field. So if you're watching on LinkedIn or if you're watching on Facebook, we're doing this live. So this is a great opportunity for you to ask questions and get some answers to maybe some of the challenges, some of the barriers you may be facing in the job search process and the interviewing process and the lead up, the prep work that you should be doing to prepare for an interview. And I mostly help folks that are transitioning into software engineering roles, but generally, I've hired enough folks in other roles that I've got a pretty good sense of what hiring managers in other departments and for other roles, what they're looking for. And many of them will say the soft skills, right? So they're looking for folks that can be problem solvers and can collaborate well with others and communicate well. But there are going to be some technical hoops and hurdles that you're going to have to jump through to establish that you are the right fit for that particular role. So I'm just checking to see if we are actually live on LinkedIn. Nice. I like it. So drop your questions in the comments. Don't be shy. More than happy to spend the next hour or so answering questions and really trying to provide as much substantive support as I can to those people that may be looking for work. This is a lot of people say this is a very employee friendly environment right now. There's definitely strong demand, and there is potentially a labor shortage. I'm not sure, but that's what people say. So that means that there should be a really good time for early career developers to maybe get a look that they might not have otherwise gotten. In previous times, it was really, really hard to get that first role as a early career developer. It's still not easy, but I think more companies are now starting to sort of evaluate what the standards are that they're using for what it takes to get an offer for an entry level role. So it could be a good time for folks to really double down your efforts, do the work, and prepare for it, and then go after some of these engineering, data engineering, DevOps type roles. I think there's plenty out there. There is labor shortage, and this is really great for people that are looking for work. Absolutely. So I think it definitely puts folks in a position for them to be able to really start at least getting more attention, getting an opportunity, getting that foot in the door to have a conversation with someone about your skill set and how you might potentially be the right fit for the roles that they have, or how maybe the role that they posted might not be exactly what they need, but instead they need X, Y, and Z, and those are attributes that you have. Sometimes there's a disconnection between the posting and what the team really needs, right? What they're using sometimes to screen people out might actually be preventing them from landing that perfect fit on that particular team. So yeah, for folks looking, now is a great time. So while we're waiting for some more questions to come through, I'm going to handle some that have come through in the interim. And again, I apologize. Sometimes, like last week, if you fire off the message, it does take a little while for it to get to me, even in the comments here. And so occasionally I will miss one or two. But I've got the ones that are emailed, the ones I missed last week. So I'll start with, there was a question about, should I build a custom portfolio site? And this comes up a lot. So I mentioned previously the 4 pieces of collateral, the 4 pieces that you kind of need to have before you can start aggressively doing your job search are, you need to have your resume, right? So you want to make sure that your resume is well done. It's not going to win you any jobs, but it can definitely exclude you. Like you can definitely lose out on an opportunity if you put something in there or you get misspellings, if it just doesn't look well put together. So you just want that to sort of like, that's main piece of collateral that's good to go before you start doing these aggressive reach outs. After you've got your resume and that's good to go, that's ready, that's kind of your calling card, should give people all the information they need to get back in touch with you and a good synopsis of where your current skill set is. Then you want to have your GitHub, right? Engineering role, you need to have GitHub. And if you don't have a lot of work on there, that's okay, but you need to have some examples of what you've built so people can get a good sense of the craftsmanship that you have, the skills that you can demonstrate. And I want to be able to go and also see how frequently are you committing code? Is coding something that you do on a fairly consistent basis? And for a early career developer, that's one of the ways you can really distinguish yourself from the competition, is just constantly be coding, right? Always be coding. If you are constantly coding and you are posting commits to GitHub and you can see a lot of activity on GitHub, that's going to make you stand out way better than what I see with a lot of folks that are having a rough go of it and they go through a coding boot camp. You see a little bit of activity and you can kind of tell, oh, this was when they were coding in their boot camp. And then you see nothing and you see white space for a really long period. And that's an indication to me that they kind of got discouraged maybe in the job search process and they're not coding as much. But when I see someone that goes through the code boot camp, you kind of see the time aligns with when they're in the boot camp. And then after that, you see a little bit fainter green. For those of you that maybe don't use GitHub, that means that they're not committing as frequently or big changes, but you're still seeing some, right? Some speckles, right, of color on there. That tells, okay, they're consistently coding. Maybe they're not pushing as much code out because they don't have as many assignments that they're working on, or they're balancing this with their job search. But you can visually see they haven't lost it. They haven't given up. They're still consistently coding every day. That's super important. So you want to have your resume, you want to have your GitHub. You definitely need to make sure that you have a portfolio site, right? So the portfolio site will cover some more of the details about that in just a second to answer that main question, which is, should I custom build it? But you want to have some examples of your work so people can see what is the quality of your work. They can also not just see the code, but they can see what does it visually look like. There can be links to your projects or just screenshots of your projects with descriptions of what you're working on. And then finally, most important, on your emails, make sure that your email has a footer on it that has the contact information for you to be able to get back, for people to get back in touch with you, right? So make sure, please, that's where it needs to be. Bonus points, LinkedIn. So if you're on LinkedIn, it's a great way for you to be connecting with other people. Having a LinkedIn profile, again, will distinguish and set you apart from people that aren't really on LinkedIn and not leveraging this as another way that you can have very similar information as your resume, but links to your portfolio sites, all that good stuff. So we should probably make that 5. We should probably just say, you know what, let's just make it 5. Once you get those pieces, you're in good shape. So specifically on the portfolio site, my answer to people that are asking, should I roll my own portfolio site, is, drumroll please, no. And here's why. Because in most cases, there are better tools than hand rolling your own portfolio website. You can, of course, but I would like to suggest to people, keep it as simple as possible, right? Don't spend a lot of time on the portfolio site itself. Instead, invest that time in the projects that you're going to put on your portfolio, right? That's where I want to see that, like, you've got some passion for it. You're solving a real problem. It's not as important to me that you can put together a corporate portfolio site that sort of like lists pictures, narrative. And I mean, sure, you can make it fancy with parallax and the auto scrolling and, all sorts of sort of, ways to jazz it up. But for most folks, I just want to see where your projects are. And then I'm usually off of that site very quickly and I'm on to the actual project work that you've done. So I don't think it's a great place to invest a ton of your cycles and time. So I am perfectly fine if people throw up like a Webflow website. Shout out to Webflow. Great product, great CMS, or any other CMS, right? You got a Gatsby site or you got a WordPress site. Throw it up there, generic template, spend $50 and get a fancy template off of Theme Forest. You're off to the races. Then put your content in there. Content is king, not the portfolio site itself. that's a real it's a rookie mistake, right? A lot of developers, once they start learning, they're like, I'm going to build a blog site. I'm going to custom make it. Then as the technology changes, they, React was kind of old in the MERN stack. I'm going to do the mean stack now, or I'm going to change it to Gatsby. They spend so much time rebuilding their blog site that they don't write blog posts, right? So don't fall into that trap. Really just try and get something up and make it pretty straightforward. So I got a question from Michael. Nice. How do I see the future of web development in the coding industry as a whole? I see the future being fairly bright. I'm not going to make any references to so bright and got to wear shades, but I see there being lots of opportunities for people to still enter in web development. And I feel like for the folks that might be saying, well, we think that there's going to be computers that are writing code, there may be. So there may be some degree of computers helping to augment the process of writing code and building websites. But there are so many types of, let's say, creative things that we're trying to design and develop, and the user experience in the front end, I think, is going to be bespoke for long enough that at least for the rest of our generation, there's going to be plenty of work in the web development field. And because what we're starting to see is we often talk about T-shaped experience. You want to have a little bit of experience across a lot, be very, very generalist, and then have one place where you're very deep. And so right now, there are so many tools, there's so many different ways you can deploy and maintain websites that it's hard to get deep experience across enough to be able to say we're all kind of consolidating around, one language or one framework or one library. Instead, it's very much more distributed. And I think that means that for a really long time, the future web development is going to continue to lean on people, humans, that have a capacity to be very learning agile and learn a lot and be able to sort of adopt new technologies and new platforms as they continue to come out and continue to evolve, and as we continue to build these creative ways of displaying information and user experiences. So I think it's going to be very, very strong for a good while. And even as we start getting better with backend, I think backend is where we'll start seeing these many more roles potentially being automated with machine learning and algorithms. But I think the front end work is always going to require that human artistic touch. When you say other coding types, my guess is you're talking about like maybe other languages and frameworks. And I think I touched on that a little bit. I think from my perspective, I think we're going to continue to see a proliferation of all these tools that are designed to make the software engineering experience and the experience of writing software faster, more accurate, easy to maintain. But yeah, there's so many different opportunities out there. I find it hard to believe that, contrary to what a lot of people might say, that the computers are going to replace humans and we're going to have these tools that will just automatically write code. There are some that use natural language processing to be able to have a human being type guidance to the system, and the system can create code and can build things based on just natural language, but it's still being driven by a software engineer. So I would still count that as requiring a software engineer. It may require at some point a more like citizen developer, low code, no code solution, but yeah. I'm looking to purchase a new computer. Do I prefer Mac or Windows? Good question. So it depends on what you're going to do with it. So if you're going to do a lot of web development, then my recommendation would be you might want to get a Mac. And here's why. Because if you have a Mac, you may also be able to run Windows on your Mac, and you can run it in a container, for lack of a better way of describing it, or you can dual boot your Mac. And a lot of the machines that you will deploy your code to are going to be different versions of Linux. And Mac uses an OS that's very close. It uses Darwin. And so I would say you're going to be closer to where you're going to eventually deploy your code if you're doing web development work, if you're working on a Mac versus a Windows machine. Now, if you work more in enterprise software, then it might make sense for you to purchase a Windows machine, especially if you're going to be building large enterprise software, or if you might be building very bespoke software for like, let's say Unity, right? And C#. Then you might want a Windows machine. So it's really going to depend on how much work do you think you're going to be doing and what type of work are you doing, right? So if you're doing video production, we might recommend one piece of hardware over a different piece of hardware. So if you want to maybe throw in a comment about what you're going to do with the computer, that might help people to kind of get a better sense of like why one might be a better choice. But just generally speaking, it's much easier to run Windows on Mac hardware than it is to run Mac OS on Windows hardware, which is somewhat possible, but it's pain. It is really hard. Really, really hard. It's a challenge. But it's possible. We call it a Hackintosh. So you can hack together running Mac OS on a Linux machine. Or Windows machine, yeah, for lack of better, Windows hardware, PC hardware. So yeah, I think that answers Michael's questions. He said non-web. And yeah, I feel like when we talk about desktop software, we're talking about device-specific software, like things that are going to run on a tablet. So tablet OS is software that runs inside of a car, so embedded devices. I think a lot of that software is going to be helped by some of the tools that we have that are available, which are amazing. Right now, there are some tools that are using machine learning to basically look at all of the GitHub repositories and provide you code hints based on like all the code that's ever been written that's available on GitHub. That's pretty impressive. But it still doesn't change the fact that, like, as a human, you have to understand what are the requirements, what's the user interface, what's the business case for building whatever the system is, and then sort of like feeding that into what might be a smarter system of actually writing the code. And then human beings have to maintain it. So at the end of the day, it's got to be written in such a way where we as humans can still digest and maintain it. So it can't be written in sort of a really low level code. Going to be written at a little bit higher of a level for us to be able to manage it as people. So if you've got a question, feel free, drop it in the comments. I'll take a swing at trying to answer it. We got a couple more that came through previously. One of them is, how many days should I wait between reach out and follow up when talking with, I think that word was meant to be, it's not spelled right, so I'm guessing. I don't know. So I'm guessing it's leads. So it depends, but I would say you want to. It's hard to be overly assertive or aggressive. So if you left a message for someone and 2 or 3 business days go by and they haven't responded to it, then I think it's fair game for you to poke them and drop another comment, see if they'll be responsive. If you're talking about the time between a phone interview and like trying to get feedback and see where the process is, then I would say a couple business days would be a reasonable amount of time to get feedback after a phone interview. After a interview itself, I would give them a little bit longer because there may be a need for them to come together as a group after an interview and provide feedback. Even if there weren't people that you interviewed with, they might still need to go through some decisions before they can actually give you feedback specifically. So keep that in mind, that there might just be a little bit of time that's needed for them to be able to give you the feedback. So the more important the decision, slightly longer time frame might make sense and be practical. So the day after an interview, I wouldn't expect an answer or decision, but maybe 1 week later, I think is reasonable to ask for some feedback. So hopefully that's helpful. Next up is, should I read cracking the code interviews and do leak code? Leak code. All right. So my thoughts on solving algorithmic challenges to prepare for a coding interview. First and foremost, cracking the coding interview, the process that they use to teach how to break down a problem and respond to a code challenge, I think is good and it's helpful. And so following that process, I think makes a ton of sense. So you could read just that portion and you'd be good. You'd get the majority of what you would need to be successful in most interviews. If you are trying to interview at a big tech company, so at a FANG organization, Facebook, Apple, Netflix, Google, Microsoft, Airbnb, then you're going to need to be able to demonstrate that you've got a good sense of how things scale and algorithms and time and space complexity. So big O, right? And so you will want to make sure you get lots of practice and lots of reps with those kinds of code challenges if you are interviewing at one of those big tech organizations. But if you're not, if you're interviewing at small to mid-sized business and it's for entry-level software engineering role, then it might be a waste of your time to do a big ton of those kinds of algorithmic code challenges. Now, it's good for you to be constantly writing code, working on passion projects, actually building, right? But solving algorithms, solving elite code challenges, probably not a great use of your time, because it's not likely for an entry-level role they're going to have that expectation. And instead, I think you're better off just having more projects to be able to demonstrate and more code that you can produce for folks that you can walk people through. So sure, you can do code challenges, you can do leak code. If you're going to, then here's the biggest tip I could recommend. Don't do them by yourself. Do them with someone else. That way you're having an opportunity to really have to communicate your thought process, communicate your design process as you design a solution and you walk through, and then you can take turns writing the code, doing code review, that sort of thing. But you want to make it an interactive experience to really get the value out of that. If you're interviewing for Facebook, sure, you just got to do a lot of leak code, right? Just stay heads down, doing code challenges for 3 to 6 months. But unless that's where you're headed, I would make it much more practical, much more relevant, and I think it'll be a better use of your time. You can still prep for those and you'll do great, but you may not have that much of an opportunity to shine because, and most coding interviews that I've given in the past, I can't tell you a time where I've asked someone for a role that I was hiring for to do solve a problem that I could then use to see like what they were thinking algorithmically and to understand their data structures and algorithms knowledge. It's just not critical to the types of projects and work that I traditionally do on a day-to-day basis. I don't do a lot of things that have to scale to like Walmart scale, Amazon scale. So I don't ask those types of questions. So hopefully that makes sense, because you could be over-engineering a solution to the problem that you have, which is proving your skill set can add value to an organization that's looking to bring someone on that's early career. I think it's like a bazooka if you're doing leak code in 6 months of cracking the code interview, cover to cover. You're working too hard. What do I think about a thank you note? Oh yeah, absolutely. Thank you notes are always great. If you can mail a handwritten thank you note, it's always a good touch. And again, that will distinguish you from everybody else, because I can't tell you the last time I got a handwritten note from a person I interviewed. Doesn't stand out. Which might mean it's never happened. I don't know. I can't recall. So yeah, handwritten note. Yes. Bonus points. Yeah, I think Michael, 100%. Being able to work with someone and spend some time solving a code challenge demonstrates a lot of skills like patience and listening, and those communication traits that are really, really important. And if it's a frustrating process, then you're going to need to learn how to work through that frustration, because it's going to be critical for your success inside of a shop, that you can really cooperate and work well with others. Coding. I like it. So the last one that I got that I did not answer before was, should I be applying for remote positions only or exclusively? And is there anything that could that backfire, basically? Maybe. Super hard to know. This is the first time we've ever been through a global pandemic. So part of me is cautious, and the thought process is that for a lot of organizations, they're not going to sort of like have the door swing back the other way and say, we're not going to allow anybody to work remote. We've experienced it. It was terrible. So everybody's got to come back into the office. I don't think that's likely. And instead, I'm seeing more of a trend of organizations saying, we recognize that while this might not be an optimal work search situation for us, it is a level of flexibility that we think makes sense for our employees as a benefit, as a perk, to really give them the flexibility for them to feel like they're being more productive. Whether they actually are more productive or not is a completely separate question, right? But the fact that it's a benefit that people enjoy, and people are striving for working at places that they feel a sense of meaning, and they feel a sense of the company recognizing their worth and the value that they're bringing. I think all those things factor into. You got to take sort of like a total compensation approach. And this is one of those areas where I think because of that, you could be fairly safe saying, I want to just 100% go remote. But keep this in mind. With that, there's also a level of responsibility. And here's what I mean by that. I have had people literally say, I want to know if I can work remote because I just graduated from a program and I want to start traveling again. And I was like, traveling again? Okay. And then they mentioned something about traveling internationally. And I thought, whoa, that's kind of problematic. I mean, I don't know, but like being able to basically think that you're going to take a new job, and then be able to travel internationally doesn't seem realistic. And that from an employer standpoint could backfire. They might think, well, how are you going to ensure that you have consistent access to the internet? How are you going to ensure that you have consistent power? How are you going to ensure that you're not going to get stranded someplace where you can't be productive? And so I don't know about y'all, but whenever I've traveled, there's lots of unexpected things, and that's okay because typically you're on vacation, so you got time, right? But when we're working, we got deadlines. If somebody's like MIA for a few hours because their internet went down or their power, that could be seriously disruptive. And so to me, it doesn't call into question whether or not it's doable. It calls into question like whether that's a responsible thing to do when you're like new to a company, and you really need to be able to get in, add value to the team, understand and contribute, and to add that additional risk of like, well, I really wanted to be able to work on the beach. It's like, okay, but that said, you missed half a day because you didn't have any power at the hotel, or the Wi-Fi broke and you couldn't get a hold of anybody. Like weird things like that come up that are okay when you're on vacation, but they're not okay when you got like a project due. So I would say when you're thinking about remote and remote first, and you're thinking about like digital nomadcy and all those kinds of things, just really make sure that you're also treating it with a degree of the lens of the interviewer, not necessarily what your goals are. Because your goals might mean that you have to become a freelancer and take a little bit more of the risk of being an entrepreneur if you want to be able to live that lifestyle. But on the other hand, the employer wants to know, are you going to be stable? Are you going to show up to work? Even if you're remote, are you going to be there when I need you to be working on something? Are you going to be available to communicate? Are you going to be able to get your stuff done? And if you can, awesome. But then you don't need to get into like, I'm going to be traveling internationally and all those kinds of things, right? Just, I get my stuff done. Don't worry about it, right? So hopefully that helps. Clinton, do I have any open apprenticeship positions available right now? Yes. So if you're interested in applying for the apprenticeship program, go to Creating Coding Career /apply. There's a button there. You'll need to fill out the application. And then once you're in queue, we'll get back in touch with you. We hired 4 apprentices recently. They're still going through the onboarding and the training process. And we'll probably hire another big batch. And so we're in the process of like screening who we're going to bring in for interviews now. And that process usually takes a few weeks for us to get through a batch, and then we notify people right away usually. So take heart. I know lots of people will send me messages that are something along the lines of, when am I going to get a job offer? It's like, well, I can't give you an answer to that because it really, in many cases, we're not going to make an offer, or it's just kind of dependent on when a new organization decides they're ready to bring on apprentices. Then we can very quickly sort of like start routing people through the process. But we want to make sure everybody gets a permanent job and not just a job with us, which is great when people get a job with us. But we want to make sure that we have a permanent role waiting for them when they complete the training portion. And so once they're done with training, we put them on a project. We want to know they're going to be able to convert, becoming a permanent part of that team some point super soon after that. So hopefully that answers that question, like where are we at with applicants? We have rolling cohorts, so we're constantly evaluating folks to determine who's going to be brought in for the next round of interviews. What are we looking for when going through selecting a candidate for the program? Okay, so we generally are looking for people that are that show an aptitude for learning. So folks that we feel like can come in and be successful in the learning portion of the program. We're looking for grit, perseverance, resilience, and again, things that demonstrate the person has a good grasp of communication, problem solving. A lot of that is going to be flushed out during the interview process, right? But to get an interview, really, folks just need to like show initiative. And if we can see some of the attributes that we're looking for, then it's a strong chance we'll bring the person in for an interview. And as long as they, during the interview, can demonstrate they've got the right soft skills, we're much more likely to make an offer than we don't really look for technical skills at all. So it's not really a selection process based on technical skills. It's much more about soft skills. So hopefully that answers the question. We're looking for folks that we know will be successful if we bring them into our program and they work hard over the stretch of the year. And in some cases, it takes less than a year for someone to get a full-time permanent offer. And really, it's on that individual. So we want to see that there's very little risk involved with bringing someone on, and we know they're going to be successful if given an opportunity. And that's what we're looking to do, is create opportunities for folks that otherwise wouldn't have an opportunity. So for those of you, I'm droning on about the apprenticeship program without really describing it well. We have a Department of Labor registered apprenticeship program. And really what we're trying to do is create an opportunity for people that are traditionally underrepresented to get a foot in the door and be that first employer that provides them paid on-the-job training and helps them gain a year of experience so they can transition into a permanent role with a larger enterprise client. So we've got a few Fortune 500 organizations that are our clients, and we'd love being able to create opportunities for people to get into a Fortune 500 company that might have thought that a career in tech was never possible. So that's what we do. But, unfortunately, we can't hire everyone that applies. And so for a lot of folks, it's not you, really. It's just we have a very limited capacity. And so there's tons of people that I'm sure would be successful given the opportunity, but we can only accept a certain number because we only have a certain number of employers that are ready and willing to hire early career candidates. So If you want, apply to the program. We'd love to have a conversation with you and see if this would be a great fit. What do I think will be the next biggest challenge in web development? That's a good question. I don't think there's a lot of big challenges. I just see a constant, steady flow of the same kinds of things happening. And so I guess one could be, there is one challenge that I think, or next biggest change, not challenge, change in web development. Okay, and this is, I think, to address this challenge. We have this philosophy of like open source and wanting to be able to like leverage work that we're doing not only for our own needs, but that might support the greater community. The problem right now is that there's lots of malware and there's lots of people that are introducing risk into the ecosystem because they're basically trying to piggyback on the fact that a lot of developers leverage and use libraries and open source that they don't have the time nor the means to be able to really monitor for security vulnerabilities and risk. And so I think the next big change in web development is going to have to be around solving for that, solving for, should we be as trusting and be using all these third parties? Should we have maybe a better system of the, let's say, the repositories where this code is held, either it's npm or NuGet or any of the various places that are repositories for these libraries of code? What responsibility do they play in making sure that the code is safe and is not going to have any kind of like malware or any other kinds of cyber threats sort of burrowing into these libraries that everybody's using, right? So there's going to be constant flow back and forth. That, I think, solving for that means we're going to have to address how do we evaluate incorporating other people's code into our product. And so I don't know how that change is going to happen, but that change is going to happen because people keep getting burned by packages that they install that then introduce vulnerabilities and off to the races. So I think that has to change, and I don't know what we're going to do, but it's coming. It's got to, because there's lots of people that are getting and it's not that the developers are sloppy. It's just really, really hard. Like, you pull in hundreds of dependencies, and it only takes one maintainer that allows someone from the community to inject something into the code base, and next thing you know, it affects tens of thousands of developers' code, which then could reach millions of end users. So hopefully that helps. That's where I think there's going to be some change. I just don't know what it is or when it's coming, but it's coming soon, I hope. A change to the general practice, I'd say. So Joe asks, should I be applying for jobs that suggest 2+ years of experience in a given language, which I have no experience, I have not had experience with? I will finish my bachelor's of science in April, but most job requirements do not truly seem entry level. So I think you're going to be ahead of the curve in terms of, if you have a degree in computer science, I wouldn't worry too much about the 2-year requirement, because they will typically say something like, we'd like a bachelor's degree or the equivalent of that much experience, and we'd like this much experience with this particular language. The good news is that in most college programs, and you can feel free to drop a comment if this is the case, they're teaching Java, and it's primarily because it's cheaper to license Java. It's free, so they can teach Java without having to maintain, licenses for a Windows machine and C#, things like that. So because lots of schools still teach Java, lots of shops still use Java. So there's a good chance that your first opportunity may require that you have some Java experience. But they understand that when you're coming out of a CS degree program, you're not going to have a consistent 2 years amount of experience. And so the question really becomes, when someone's asking for 2+ years of experience, depending on the rest of the language of that job request, they could be using it to screen out, to your point, to be screening out people that are more junior or more entry level. And so I would 100% agree. Most job requirements are not for entry level roles. They're not intended for entry level. Most companies would prefer to hire someone that is mid to senior, senior or above. So I often say everyone's looking for seniors, right? And so that can seem overwhelming from a early career developer standpoint, but that's all right. You have to sort of like be comfortable being uncomfortable and being in an environment where the vast majority of employers want to bring someone on that has way more experience than you're going to have. But everybody's got to start somewhere. And so there are plenty of roles out there for early career developers. It just requires a little bit more work for you to be able to find them. And so as an example, even with all jobs, even the senior engineer jobs, there are way more available openings than there are postings. So many jobs become available and they're never posted anywhere, at least externally. And it may just be that an engineering manager says, hey, we just got a budget approval to add 2 more members to our team. Everybody on the team, let me know if you've got anybody that you think would be a great fit on our team. And that process and the referrals that they get, all that happens before they can even get the posting done and get HR to go post it on the site. They've already found a candidate that they like for the role. And in some cases, by the time they post it, they already know that they're going to hire, one of the internal candidates. And so don't worry. I wouldn't get too concerned about that. Just know it's a numbers game, and the numbers are in your favor. If you've got a CS degree, I would say you got a little bit of experience with Java, you're going to be fine. Don't stress over a 2-year requirement, because there are going to be plenty of opportunities where with a CS degree, a little bit of Java developing under your belt, you're going to be fine. When I say fine, I mean you're going to get starting salary offers somewhere in the $60,000 to $70,000 range easily. So nothing to sneeze at. Yeah, I don't know when it's going to shift, but I think it might shift a little bit from Java to Python. It's just going to take a little while. But it wouldn't surprise me to start seeing more college programs starting to teach the fundamentals of computer science in Python. It's not the most efficient language, but it's a good teaching language, good learning language. So a little less efficient than Java, but way easier. Any other questions? I feel like I've droned on this one, but I answered all the questions from last, and I stayed on top of the new questions. So I feel like we've accomplished a lot together. I'll hang out here for a few more minutes. If there is anybody that has any additional questions, feel free. The way to get your question to me is just drop a comment, and we're on Facebook, and we're on LinkedIn and YouTube and Periscope and Twitch. So once you place your comment in there, it takes about a minute or so for it to get to me through the inner tubes. And then once I see it, I'll answer it. If we go, another few minutes and I don't see any more questions, then we'll stop for today. But we will do this again next week. We do it every week on Tuesdays at 12 o'clock noon. Call this Looking for Work. And yeah, if you found this helpful, please share it with anybody else that you think we could help alleviate some of the challenges that I know it's tough trying to find that first gig. I get it. I understand. And I've been in the bootcamp space now for about 6 years. Now that we run an apprenticeship, I feel relieved that we're not doing, traditional tuition-based program. But I think that from my perspective, the toughest part of this journey for a lot of folks is getting that first job, that first permanent role. And then after that, it's all downhill. First one's the only one that's going to be super hard. Everything else, easy, smooth sailing. So you only got to worry about this once, Joel. One time. And again, it could be brutal, which is why I really love being able to answer people's questions and help them just be more efficient and be kind of work smarter, not harder during the process, because I've definitely seen a lot of the common mistakes that people make. They don't track their reach outs and follow-ups. So you have no idea what's working, what's not working. or they don't follow up at all, or they're afraid to reach out to people. There's just common things that like people make. And if they make one of those mistakes, they're usually making half a dozen of them. And then they get a combination of frustration and blinded by the challenge and the struggle. And it's really, really hard for them to just like, okay, pause. If you just tweak this, and this, you start getting better and you start gaining momentum, but it's just really, really hard to do without someone making that suggestion. Like what you're working on right now, probably not the best use of your time. How about try this, and this? So if this has been helpful for you, please feel free to, like, subscribe, share, let other folks know, because I'd love to be able to help as many people as I can by just helping to answer questions that I have seen this happen over and over and over again for hundreds of students. And the ones that successfully make it, I mean, I've gotten people into IBM and Facebook and Walmart Labs and Amazon, and it's usually because they just use a more efficient process that helps them get through the process faster. So, do I have any advice on moving from Canada to the US for a software job? Getting sponsored is tough. I don't know what it's like right now for Canadians, but I know it has been really, really challenging, and there's different quotas. I'm not an immigration attorney by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not even an attorney. So that said, I would say there are going to probably be a lot of organizations that might be able to hire you as a contractor if you're not here in the U.S. There could be a lot of startups that might be willing to hire you as a contractor, but I couldn't tell you like how challenging it's going to be right now, because especially with the COVID climate and with the last administration that we had, they were very anti H-1B visas, and they did a lot to sort of, let's just say, decimate that program. So I think we could be in a period where the opportunities for people that are non-U.S. citizens to be able to work here in the U.S. could be opening back up, but it couldn't get any worse than it's been. But I don't know how fast it's going to recover. Most of the jobs that I see people coming in on H-1B visas, they're usually coming in from a couple of very specific countries, and they're not usually Canada or Mexico. It's usually like India. That's probably like the number one that I see most often. A lot of software engineers hired in H-1B visas, and then they really struggle. It takes them could take a decade for them to get through and get permanent status so they can stay here, which is a shame. The system is not, it is very broken right now. So yeah, I don't know. It's not only a question of getting sponsorship, because I think a lot of organizations might be willing to sponsor Canadian. It's going to be a question of like what is the pathway for you to not have to worry about that and become a either permanent resident alien or permanent work status here in the U.S. No idea. That's the best answer. No idea. An adult trainer by profession. Nice. So I think now's a really good time to be in the training space, because there's lots and lots of different ecosystems that you could specialize in. So if you're training in the tech space, there's all of these different systems, like Microsoft's ecosystem, and you've got Oracle's ecosystem, and you get NetSuite's ecosystem. And so, yeah, ServiceNow, Salesforce. So there's lots of opportunities if you're a trainer to leverage those skills to be able to help other people upskill. And so the question that was asked earlier, I think we're going to see a lot of that. We're going to continue to see all of these separate ecosystems and all this competition that breeds demand for people to have like HubSpot experience, right? It's not just experience with like an ERP or CRM. It's going to be like HubSpot versus Salesforce versus Dynamics, right? And that just means you need much more specialized individuals on both the training and the developer side, on the technical side, on the functional side. And so that's why I just think there's going to continue to be an explosion of opportunity for folks. And yeah, so being a trainer right now, you're in a good spot. You got to just pick a lane, get after it. All right. Any other questions? Hearing none, if there are no other questions, we're going to wrap a little early. But we'll be back next week, every Tuesday. All right. Later.